There are names that fade with time, and then there are names that refuse to disappear, names that linger in the air like smoke, making the powerful shift uncomfortably in their seats. Jeffrey Epstein is dead, but the world he built, that's still very much alive. Picture this: Arab billionaires, former presidents, members of royal families, tech moguls who shape how billions of people communicate, all of them at one point or another moving through the same circles. The same private islands, the same exclusive gatherings, and when the questions started coming, when journalists began digging, every single one of them said the same thing: I barely knew him, it was just business, I had no idea. Elon Musk also said the same thing: I knew nothing. But here is the thing: how much weight does a claim of ignorance really carry when you have been photographed together? When emails show years of correspondence? When flight logs place you on private jets heading to private islands? This isn't a story about one man, it's a story about a system where power protects power, where wealth opens doors that should remain closed, and where proximity to evil gets explained away as coincidence. The files that have slowly emerged over the past few years don't just contain names, they contain a map. A map of how the world's elite operated in the shadows, believing they'd never be exposed. They were wrong. Let's start with royalty, because if there's anyone who should have been untouchable, it was Prince Andrew, Duke of York, son of Queen Elizabeth II. For Americans watching this, understand, the British royal family isn't just celebrities. They're a living institution protected by centuries of tradition, protocol, and public deference. They don't just lose titles. That doesn't happen, except it did. Prince Andrew's name doesn't appear in these documents as a footnote. It appears again and again. Emails were exchanged, meetings were arranged, and then there are the photographs, the ones even royal PR couldn't make disappear. Images of Andrew with his arm around a young woman standing beside Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's alleged accomplice, smiling like this was all perfectly normal. When the scandal broke, the palace tried damage control. Andrew gave a disastrous BBC interview where he claimed he couldn't have been at a nightclub on a specific night because he was at Pizza Express in Woking. He said he didn't sweat due to a medical condition caused by the Falklands War. The interview became a global punchline, but the consequences were deadly serious. In January 2022, something unprecedented happened. Queen Elizabeth stripped her own son of his military titles and royal patronages. He could no longer use his royal highness in any official capacity. A living prince, symbolically exiled from royalty, not because a court had convicted him, but because the association itself had become toxic. And here's where it gets even messier. Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, publicly apologized for her own connection to Epstein. She called it a terrible error of judgment, but just months later, private correspondence showed her still seeking advice from people within that very network, asking what she should do next, how she should handle the fallout. This contradiction isn't unique to her. It's endemic to this entire class of people. Relationships aren't truly severed, they're just redirected, rebranded. The apology goes public, but the phone numbers stay in the contacts list. For American viewers, this matters because it shows that no amount of institutional protection, not even a monarchy, can withstand the weight of these associations once they become public. The question isn't whether Andrew committed a prosecutable crime. The question is, what kind of relationship allows you to be that close to someone, like Epstein, for that long? And why did it take a global scandal for anyone to care? Now let's talk about the people who control our digital lives, the ones who decide what we see, how we communicate, even how we think about the future. Elon Musk, the richest man on Earth, the guy who sends rockets to space and promises to colonize Mars. His name appears in the Epstein files, not extensively, just a handful of emails. A few references, but even those few lines are enough to show how far Epstein's reach extended into Silicon Valley. There were discussions about islands, invitations were sent, offers were made. Musk has denied any wrongdoing, and there's no evidence he did anything illegal. But the question remains, why did someone like Epstein have access to someone like Musk in the first place? What door was open there, and why? Then there's Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, the man whose search engine processes billions of queries every single day. His connection to Epstein involved early invitations, private film screenings, intimate dinners. This was before the allegations became headline news, sure, but it still raises an uncomfortable question. In the world of tech elites, how normalized was socializing with someone like Epstein? Here is what Americans need to understand. Silicon Valley has spent the last decade facing reckonings over workplace culture, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability. The #MeToo movement hit tech hard. Stories emerged of harassment, discrimination, and toxic boys club behavior at the highest levels. So when we see tech titans' names in documents connected to Epstein, it's not happening in a vacuum. It is part of a broader pattern, a pattern where brilliant innovators somehow thought the rules did and applied to them, where genius became an excuse, where wealth became a shield. And here's the most unsettling part. Epstein wasn't just rich. He positioned himself as an intellectual, a facilitator of big ideas. He donated to MIT. He hosted scientists and academics. He made himself seem legitimate, essential even to the world of big thinkers and world changers. That's how predators operate at this level. They don't lurk in alleyways. They walk into boardrooms. They get invited to TED conferences. They become someone you can't afford not to know. Richard Branson is the guy who built an empire on adventure and charisma, Virgin Records, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Galactic, the smiling billionaire with the long hair, always ready for a publicity stunt, always promoting the next big thing. But the files reveal a different side of Branson's world, invitations to private islands, jokes exchanged with Epstein, and then something even more troubling, advice. According to documents, Branson gave Epstein counsel on how to rehabilitate his image, how to use powerful connections to make his legal problems disappear, how to leverage relationships with influential people to shift the narrative. That advice was given. That's not alleged. It's documented. Now, Branson has said he regrets his association with Epstein and called it a mistake. Fine, but let's be clear about what's happening here. This wasn't just a social misstep. This was one billionaire advising another on how to escape accountability by weaponizing their shared networks. This is the playbook. This is how elite circles protect their own. You don't need to break the law yourself. You just need to know people who can make problems go away. You don't need dirty hands. You just need clean lawyers, powerful friends, and the right PR team. For Americans watching this, think about how different the justice system looks depending on where you stand. If you're working class and get accused of something, you're presumed guilty until proven innocent in the court of public opinion. Your mugshot is on the local news. Your employer fires you before the trial even starts. But if you're a billionaire, you get advice on image management, you get introduced to fixers, you get time to craft the perfect statement, and more often than not, you get away with it. That's not justice. That's a protection racket for the ultra-wealthy. Let's talk about presidents. Because when it comes to Epstein, this story crosses party lines in ways that should make every American uncomfortable. Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, a Republican and a Democrat, bitter political rivals, but both of their names appear in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Trump was photographed with Epstein multiple times in the 1990s. In early 2000s, they were both fixtures of the Manhattan social scene parties at Mar-a-Lago events in New York. Trump has said they had a falling out years before Epstein's arrest, that he barely knew him, that it was all exaggerated. Maybe, but the photos exist. The connections were real. Bill Clinton's has run deeper in some ways. Flight logs show he traveled on Epstein's private jet, the one that came to be known as the Lolita Express. Multiple times, Clinton's team says these were legitimate trips related to his foundation's work in Africa. No evidence has emerged directly implicating Clinton in any crimes, but the optics. Devastating. Here's what matters for the American public. This isn't about left versus right. This is about access, about how someone like Epstein could have connections to presidents from both major parties, about what that says regarding who gets close to power and why. Think about it. Epstein wasn't an elected official. He wasn't a diplomat. He was a financier whose wealth was always somewhat mysterious, whose client list was always vague. Yet he had access to presidential circles, private government discussions, and the kinds of gatherings where policy gets shaped behind closed doors. And when the scandal broke, both sides pointed fingers at the other. Republicans said, look at Clinton. Democrats said, look at Trump. And in all that partisan noise, the real question got lost. Why were both of them in Epstein's orbit to begin with? This is what elite impunity looks like. It doesn't matter what your politics are when you're wealthy enough. The same doors open, the same jets fly, the same islands welcome you. And here's the part that should anger every American. Files remain sealed, documents are redacted, names are blacked out. Why? Who's being protected? And what does it say about our democracy when the public doesn't have the right to know who was connected to one of the most notorious criminals in modern history? Let's talk about what we don't see, because sometimes what's missing from a document tells you more than what's written on the page. The Epstein files, the ones that have been released, are full of redactions, blacked out names, entire paragraphs made unreadable, legal protections cited, privacy concerns raised. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Justice is not equal to power. For an ordinary person, a single accusation can destroy your life. Your name gets published. Your face is on the news. Your reputation is gone before you ever see a courtroom. But for the powerful, silence survives even after hundreds of references. Names stay hidden, lawyers file motions, judges grant protections, and the public is left with fragments of truth, enough to know something terrible happened, but never enough to see the full picture. Think about what this means. It means there are people with influence, people with access to the highest levels of government, business, and culture whose names we will probably never know, not because they're innocent, but because they're protected. This is the architecture of elite impunity. It's not that laws don't exist. It's that laws bend differently depending on who you are. And here is the hypothetical that makes this even more disturbing. Imagine if the person at the center of all this was Jeffrey Epstein. Imagine if this was someone from a different background. Someone Muslim, for example. Be honest, if a wealthy Muslim businessman had been accused of these crimes, had these connections to presidents and princes and billionaires, how would the media have covered it? What would the headlines look like? There would be wall-to-wall coverage calling it a terror network. Every mosque he'd ever attended would be investigated. His entire family would be dragged through the mud. A new wave of Islamophobia would sweep the country, and politicians would use it as justification for policies targeting entire communities. But because Epstein was white, wealthy, and well-connected in Western elite circles, the framing is different. It's a scandal. It's a web of influence. It's treated as an aberration, not a pattern. That double standard should disturb us all. It shows that outrage is selective, that accountability depends on your position in the social hierarchy, and that the systems meant to deliver justice are, in fact, designed to protect certain people while punishing others. So where does that leave us? This story doesn't end with one arrest or one conviction. It doesn't end with Epstein's death in a jail cell under suspicious circumstances. It doesn't even end with the names we've discussed here, because this isn't really about Jeffrey Epstein. It never was. This is about a system, a global architecture of power where relationships are currency, where access is bought and sold, and where silence is the most valuable commodity of all. It's about how wealth insulates people from consequences, how fame provides cover, how institutional power protects its own. It's about princes who lose their titles not because of proven crimes, but because association itself becomes untenable, about tech moguls whose companies shape global communication, but whose private lives remain conveniently opaque, about billionaires who give each other advice on image rehabilitation, like they're discussing investment strategies. It's about presidents from both parties who somehow ended up in the same predator's orbit. And a media landscape that turned their bipartisan complicity into just another partisan talking point. It's about files that remain sealed, names that stay redacted, and a justice system that bends toward power instead of truth. And it's about all of us, the public, who are left with questions that may never be fully answered. Who did? What? Who knew what? And why, after all these years, are we still discovering new layers? The truth is unfolding slowly, layer by layer, name by name, document by document. Each revelation pulls back another curtain, shows us another room in a house we didn't know existed, and the most unsettling realization: this house has many more rooms, many more names, many more secrets still waiting to surface. Jeffrey Epstein is gone, but the world he was part of, the networks, the protections, the systems that enabled him, those are still here, still operating, still protecting the powerful, while the rest of us watch from the outside, wondering if justice will ever truly be served. That's the real story. Not one man's crimes, but a whole system's complicity. And until we're willing to dismantle that system, until we demand real accountability regardless of wealth or status or connections, this story will keep repeating itself, different names, different scandals, same structure. The question is, are we ready to do something about it?